Everybody hear me? Great. All right. Good evening and welcome to what I'm sure is to be a very thought-provoking discussion with two very special individuals. Before we begin, I would like to introduce myself and the individuals who have been generous enough to be with us tonight. I am McWilliams. I am completing an individual major titled Health Perspectives, Well-Being in the U.S., a major that has allowed me to explore the intersections between the multiple facets and opinions in the U.S. healthcare system. To see more about the major, please reference the handout that you received on your way in, or look on with the neighbor. Tonight's event is the capstone project for my major, as I have been studying the specific topic of perspectives on incarceration and reproductive health care throughout this entire academic year. Along the path of studying this topic, I had the pleasure of meeting the two very fascinating and inspiring people seated beside me. We have Pamela Wynn. Hello, everyone. Pamela is an Aaron J. Bully Fellow, as well as a Just Leadership Fellow an Aaron J. Bully Fellow from the Feminist Women's Health Center. And she flew in all the way from her hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, to be with us tonight. She works tirelessly to help women affected by incarceration, greatly inspired by her own experience of being pregnant while in a Georgia federal holding prison, having received unacceptable prenatal care during her own incarceration. Pamela holds 3 post-secondary nursing degrees and has herself worked as an OB, or obstetrics nurse. She is a co-author of the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act and has been working with New Jersey Senator Cory Booker to promote this act that would provide reproductive resources to incarcerated women across the nation. As another part of her work on policy, she is working in collaboration with multiple organizations to create a multi-state anti-shackling bill, as well as a Bill of Rights for incarcerated pregnant persons to serve as guidance in detention facilities. Additionally, she is the founder of Restore Her, a nonprofit aimed at providing societal re-entry support to women who recently have been discharged from prison or jail. As if this was not sufficient for advocacy work, Pamela is also the co-founder of the formerly incarcerated College Graduates Network, which promotes higher education of convicted individuals. Also, she is a member of the Women's Advisory Team of the nonprofit Human Impact Partners, which seeks to determine the social determinants of criminalization. Also joining us this evening is Dr. Rebecca Schlafer. She is an assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Minnesota Medical School. Rebecca holds a PhD in child psychology and a master's in public health. She has led several research projects focusing on determining the effects that parental imprisonment can have on children and families, as well as projects identifying and evaluating reproductive health support systems for incarcerated individuals. She was the chair of the advisory committee for Minnesota's anti-shackling bill for pregnant individuals in prison or jail, which recently passed in 2015. Additionally, she co-founded the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, an organization that provides support to imprisoned mothers-to-be before, during, and after they give birth. Also, Rebecca serves as a volunteer guardian ad litem, advocating for abused and neglected children in juvenile court. She also works to promote restorative justice, recently co-founding Project Teddy Bear, a program in which her students collect and send yarn to a local prison where the individuals create teddy bears and then send them to the Ronald McDonald House. So Pamela and Rebecca have generously agreed to take part in a conversation about reproductive health in the carceral setting. We will begin with a 30 to 40-minute discussion and then move to a Q&A session for about 20 to 30 minutes. And at that point, if you want to ask questions of either of the experts, you're able to do that or add comments, or if you have any questions about the major, that would be time to do that too. So welcome, everyone. Alrighty, so I'd like to begin by just asking about what your both of your individual experiences are within the carceral system, especially relating to reproductive health care. Pamela, as someone who has been pregnant in a prison, if you could talk about your experience, and then Rebecca, you can talk about how the women in Minnesota would experience it.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, my experience, I was sentenced to 78 months. During that time, I spent 18 of those months at a privately owned correctional facility that serves as a holding facility for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And at that facility, when I got there, I wasn't aware that I was pregnant until I went through intake and they did a pregnancy test on me. At the time that they did the pregnancy test, I noticed that the whole atmosphere in the room changed. The looks on everybody's faces, just their attitudes, it got like pretty tense in the room. I didn't understand why and what was going on, but eventually I would. After I initially found out about my pregnancy, I guess about 2 or 3 weeks later, I was taken out to go to court. And as part of transporting me to court, I was shackled. Shackled meaning I had handcuffs on my ankles that were chained together, which prevented my instep to be like only a few inches apart. There was another chain that was around my belly that was connected to handcuffs at my wrist to basically keep me from being able to move, limiting my mobilization. And at this point, I'm asked to step into a van, which I'm being transported in, and I'm 5'1", so my instep is not too wide already, and then to limit it with these shackles, it was very difficult for me to try to lift up high enough to get into the van. And one of the days I was being transported, I failed trying to step into the van, and being shackled, you can't brace your fall, you just basically fall. After that, I started experiencing spotting and streaks of blood in my urine, and just sporadically. I sent several medical requests to medical stating that I was having bleeding and I was concerned about it and requested to be seen. Initially, I didn't get any response back for like a couple of weeks. Then finally, I got a response back that stated that that was normal during pregnancy. And when I got that response back, I responded back myself, and I explained to them that my background was nursing and obstetric nursing at that, and that was not anything normal that I had learned through my study. At that point, they brought me up front, and I was introduced to the head nurse that was over the medical department and the doctor that was contracting with the facility to provide medical care. And basically, they explained to me that the correctional facility was basically set up for men. They had not expected to have any women, definitely not any pregnant women. And that would explain what the change in the atmosphere was when they found out that I was pregnant. She said they didn't have a clue what they were going to do. They just didn't know. They didn't have a plan. They couldn't even provide me a prenatal vitamin at this point. So another week went by, and I guess they were trying to figure things out. They brought me back up. They told me that they would have to send out a request to the U.S. Marshals to get permission. to take me to the emergency room. And now I'm like, this has been about 4 weeks now since it's happened. And it was another 4 weeks before we got a response back from the marshals that stated I could go to the ER. So now we're talking almost 8 weeks, and they take me to the ER. The ER doctor is like, really? This is the quote-unquote emergency room. Emergencies happen within 24 hours. This is weeks old. You know, this is not what we do. She needs to see an obstetrician. He was like, better yet, how about a perinatologist? And their response was they couldn't take me anywhere other than where they had been approved. So we had to send out another request, which was another turnaround time of 4 weeks. So this time I went to the obstetrician, get there, they don't have an ultrasound machine in their office. But I couldn't go to the hospital to get the ultrasound. We had to put in another request. So in the midst of putting in all of these requests, which turnaround time was another 4 weeks, I ended up miscarrying. And I never received any type of medical care. So that's my experience with healthcare in a correctional setting. There was no medical care, there was no counseling, there was no educating. Basically, there was nothing.
You haven't, that was at the beginning, right?
Yes.
You have to be another like, 4 years or so after that.
Mm-hmm.
Did they provide any sort of, maybe you talk with your family or?
No. The night that I miscarried, the way the facility was designed, at 10 o'clock you were locked into a cell. And that cell didn't have any lighting, no call buttons, no anything. So you're just locked in the dark room from 10 o'clock to 6 in the morning. And once we were locked in, that particular day, the drinking water was not drinkable. We had brown water coming out of the water fountain. I had put in a request to the warden about the water. He had come down and examined the water, and he did agree that it was not drinkable. And he had instructed the staff to provide us with ice and water on a daily basis. But most days the ice machine did not work. This particular day, it wasn't working. So it was an entire day that I had gone through without drinking anything. And so once we were locked in, I started having a little cramping. And I knew from my experience that I was dehydrated, which precipitates cramping and, miscarrying. So at that point, I went to the sink and I'm drinking water out of the sink. And the cramps, got a little more intense. So I decided maybe I just need to try to go to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, there'll be ice everywhere and I'll be fine. So I dozed off, but the cramping got more intense to the point where the pain woke me up. So once it woke me up, I decided that I needed to try and drink more water. So when I stood up to go to the sink, I felt a good wetness. And because it was dark, I couldn't see what it was. I don't know. I didn't know what it was. And from that point, the pains really got excruciating to the point where I knew I was having contractions because I could actually feel my belly knotting up. I guess around this time I should have been around 19, 20 weeks pregnant. So the pain was to the point where I was starting to moan out in pain, and I woke up the young lady that was sharing the cell with me, and she asked me what was wrong. I told her, I was having contractions. I could feel it. I knew that's what it was. So because we were locked in, you can't call anybody. She went to the door, and I remember her putting her face in the crack of the door and just yelling out, to the other ladies that were in there that something was wrong with me, something was wrong with my baby. And I just remember hearing all of the ladies just screaming to the top of their lungs, trying to get anybody's attention to come in. and they were yelling for hours. It was about 3 hours before anybody finally came. So when they finally made their way there and opened up the cell door, where we could have some light, see, blood was everywhere, so the wetness was blood. And at that point, the guards, they were looking, they didn't know what to do. And they didn't want to touch me. They didn't want to touch me. They weren't sure what to do. They were asking me, can I walk? And I was located on the top floor, and I was in too much pain. I was like, no, can't walk, can't do anything. So I just remember some kind of way they had a stretcher up there, and it took me down. The nurse that was working at night, not sure if she was a new nurse or she just hadn't had any experience with emergency situations, because she was like a deer caught in the headlights. She was just not sure what to do. She was taking blood pressures on this arm, then she was on my ankles, and I was like, why are you down there taking my blood pressure? She's going, well, it's dropping. It was, 87 over, and now it's 7. I said, I'm bleeding. I am hemorrhaging. It's not going to go up. I was like, can you just call 911 and get me out of here? And she was like, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I have to call the marshals or what to do. So I asked her, can you just call the doctor? So she did call her, and she's telling the doctor, well, she's hurting. And I'm looking like, hurting? No, I'm not hurting. I'm about to die here. And she's like, and so I'm screaming in the background, no, I'm not hurting, I'm dying. I'm having contractions, I'm like, right now, they're about 2 minutes apart. They're lasting up to a minute. Can you please tell her to dial 911? And since the doctor was familiar with my background, I remember her telling her, listen to what she's saying, she knows what she's talking about. Just go ahead and call 911, and the marshals will have to figure it out. And she did. I got to the hospital. The marshals met us there, and as soon as they got there, the first thing they did was shackle me to the bed. And so now I'm hurting like, I don't know, I can't even describe the pain, but it's, it's excruciating. And I can't do anything but bear it, because I can't brace myself, can't ball up, can't do anything, because, I'm shackled to the bed. I remember the nurse doing the ultrasound to see, what was going on. And she told me she didn't see a baby, that I had passed it, and we needed to find where it was to make sure that there were no parts of conception left inside of me, to know if I needed a DNC. I was like, I don't know where anything is. I was busy trying to, get myself here. And she looked to the officers that were with me, and they said to her, oh, we threw it in the trash. And even now, all these years later, just to think and to hear their voices, to say that, your child was just discarded in the trash like it was nothing. I think that when I think about everything I've experienced in life, that has to be the lowest, the worst thing to just hear that. So afterwards, they wanted to do a DNC. I refused, and the reason that I refused is because, back to your question, when they take you out, you're not allowed to contact your family. So no one knew where I was. And my concern was, if something were to happen to me, my family would know. I don't know what they would tell my family. So I didn't want to do anything that was going to put me at risk. So unless they could do the DNC with me awake, we weren't doing the DNC. I would rather take my chances with, whatever would happen, if there was something left there, and deal with it later, then to allow them to put me to sleep and, not wake up again and not have my family know where I was or what happened. But no, you can't contact your family. They don't know anything till after the fact. I don't think I spoke to my family until about 5 days later. And of course they were worried because they hadn't heard from me. And when they call to inquire about you, they won't even tell them, what happened or that you're at the hospital. They won't give them any information.
I'm just so humbled that you're willing to share such a traumatizing story. What happened to you is, I think it's great, it breaks our hearts. And I'm very, very touched that you're, stronger from it. You're making so much change. It's really powerful to hear your story. I wonder, what do you think of when you hear this terrible thing that happened, or...
Yeah, I wish I could say that it's unique. And I think that's the part that's so unsettling to me, is that we've heard over the years so many stories that don't have the same details per se, but have the same horror. And that, I think, is one thing that I keep expecting, and so often in the corrections world, we're met with, well, that was one person's story, or that's an exception. And at some point you start hearing the same narrative over and over again, that you don't need any more stories, right? The conditions in which we're incarcerating women in this country are horrifying. And they were horrifying then, and they continue to be horrifying all across this country. And so I'm so sorry that you had your experience, but I feel so thankful that you are advocating, because you know that this continues every day all across the country in this state.
So what are some, what can be done about it? I know there's the Presentula project, right, kind of systematically, how can we move forward, to ensure that, because no one should have to experience that, or, the worries that you've heard about.
Well, I think we have to ask ourselves, if prison is any place for pregnant women to be, right? Fundamentally, is this where we think any pregnant person in this country should be? And to Pamela's point, prisons and correctional facilities were not set up for women. They were designed for men, by men, fundamentally at that level. And very little has changed to think about gender-specific or trauma-informed care for women in these facilities. Layer on the pregnancy, and they're just ill-equipped to handle pregnant women. I've certainly heard pregnant women in our program say, prison saved my life, and I needed to come here to save my life and to save my baby. But as we dig into that a little bit more, it's very clear that what she needed was sober housing. She needed drug treatment. She needed protection from an abusive partner. She needed to be able to live safely, and that those things could happen not inside of a prison, right? And so what she needed to save her life was a support system and a safety net in a community that has failed her. And I think that's what we see so often when we think about who's coming into prison, particularly when we look at the pathways to prison for women. Histories of trauma and failures of safety nets in the community to provide basic supports.
So I have something I would like to bring up to that point. There was a woman who was unable to come today, but she's the senior nurse at the Hennepin County Medical Center. And so I emailed her and I asked, would you be willing to come talk about this? And she couldn't come, but she gave me this note. She says, in regard to prenatal care for incarcerated women, I think one thing that would help them a lot would be community-based interventions to help them get prenatal care before they are incarcerated. Maybe partnerships with groups that already work with high-risk populations. Often we have women who come to jail already far into their pregnancy who have not had any prenatal care before coming to jail. The first trimester is so important for fetal development, and I think they could really benefit from education and health care before they even come to us. And then that reminded me of a quote that I read in Carolyn Suffren's book, Jail Care, which I have with me. I won't read the quote, but the book, highly recommend if anyone wants to read. But where this person was saying, we should actually, if someone is pregnant and living in a community that makes their pregnancy high risk, we should almost advocate for them to go into prison, because at least they'll get, prenatal vitamins, prenatal care. What is your response to that? I mean,
Lies.
yeah,
Lies.
yeah.
That's my response to that, lies. I'll say this. Every prison or correctional or detention facility or jail, they're all different. They don't have central monitoring. So what you get at one place, you do not get at another place. There may, I won't say that there are not, because there are some prisons, like here in Minnesota, you all have to do a program. So you are.
We have a lot of room to grow, though.
Yes.
Just be fair.
But the women are getting some education, they have someone to advocate to make sure that they get decent care. Whereas in a smaller or rural setting, they're not gonna have anything. It's not even a thought. The thought is more along the lines of security, monitoring, discipline. They don't even think rehabilitation, healthcare. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So depending on the setting, depends on what you get. So for me, I think what's necessary is if we could have like a central monitoring of all these different facilities and put them on one accord, at least when it comes to healthcare, or best practices for incarcerated women, where they have some type of protocol that everybody follows, so that they're getting it. And so right now, to bring any of these changes about, what we're doing right now, bringing awareness, because it's astounding to me how many people, well, I guess it's not really astounding, but it does blow me away when I talk to people and they don't have a clue that these things are happening. Most people think like what you just said. They go to prison is going to give them everything that they need. And honestly speaking, before I had my own personal experience, that's exactly what I thought. Because I've had friends and family that have been incarcerated, and when they would call and say, oh, can you send money because I need this, and I'm like, they feed them, they give them this, they give them everything they need. I don't really need to do that right now. But now, from my own personal experience, I understand that that's not always the case. It just depends on where you are.
I think Pamela's point about the differences across correctional facilities is so important, and one that's really often lost. So we have in Minnesota one state prison, the Shakopee Women's Prison, and that means that, from Bemidji to Aiken, everybody is going to the women's state prison if you're convicted of a felony level offense, right? But we have 84 county jails, county correctional facilities spread all across the state. And after working with women at our prison, this is where our Prison Doula Project started, it was the women who said to us repeatedly, you've got to go to the county jails, you've got to go to the county jails. The conditions in the county jails are horrifying. I sat in county jails for months and had no care. You've got to go to the county jails. And so we listened and we started doing interviews with jail administrators and health service providers all across the metro area and then beyond to ask them about the care of pregnant women in their facilities. And what we heard repeatedly was exactly what you said at the beginning, Pamela, which is we don't really know how to handle pregnant women. We have them so rarely that we don't really know how to handle them in these conditions. And so, yeah, we try to get them extra meals. Yeah, we try to get them a prenatal vitamin. But one of the things we heard over and over again, which was so astounding, and which is what led ultimately to us to push for some legislation here, was that we asked them about how they identified pregnant women, right? Because at the prison, they're screening all pregnant women, they're screening all women for pregnancy that come in under the age of 65. But at the jails, several of the things that we heard over and over again was, we don't test for pregnancy because if we find out they're pregnant, then we have to provide them with care, and that care is expensive.
Right.
And because they're turning over so fast, it's not worth our money to test them. And so they were making this economic trade-off at a local correctional facility level, hoping that women would just bail out, bond out, get out before they needed care. But what we were hearing at the prison, right, by the time women had moved through the system, is that some of them had sat in county jail for months, not receiving any prenatal care, not knowing they were pregnant until they got to prison, only then finding out they were pregnant, and we have missed this huge window of opportunity for intervention. And so I think it's important that even though we have the doula program now in Minnesota, in our state prison, and women across the state have access to a doula now if they're incarcerated, the whole state, that we still have huge variations in care, and a lot of corrections administrators who think that this is a population of folks who are undeserving of care, and that treating the baby or responding to the pregnancy is not their problem and not their job. And so I think that's hugely important, this just variation in care and attention to this issue.
I'd like to ask another question about, I'm curious regarding what your opinion is on, so your family, your mother, right? And I'm certain that several of the women that you interact with are mothers. So there's something that I recently learned about, and I've read about in the American Journal of Criminal Justice, talking about conjugal visits and kind of, a visit where the family members are alone with the incarcerated individual for up to, I think it's 48 hours. So initially I thought, this is great. I don't have children, but I think if I did, I would love, to see them while I was behind bars, and that would impact the development of the children. But then I continued reading, and it said that now the number of states that have this program has decreased to 4. So now it's just Washington, California, Connecticut, and New York. So I'm wondering why do you think that's happening? And what kind of impact would a conjugal visit have had on yourself, Pamela, if you could see your children and be alone with them, and the children who are, active in the Minnesota prison?
Well, I think the reason that they were doing away with it was for the same reasons that Rebecca just spoke about. It means more staff, it means it's more money and more time that they have to invest in, in providing that type of visit. Would it be good? Yes and no. Yes, it would be good to get a good, spend personal time with your family. However, I think it's more traumatic at the end when the visit is over. Mm-hmm. You think, oh, I'm doing a good thing because I'm allowing them to come, but you don't think ahead to when the time ends. Because when the time ends is when it just really goes bad. And which is why a lot of women opt to not even see them, because you can't deal with that. The kids are crying, they don't understand why they gotta be separated now. I just had all this great time with you, and now you just gonna snatch me away and strip me of that, and now I gotta go back to not seeing you for who knows how long, months, maybe years, or whenever I can come back. And to me, that's more traumatic from the child.
Yeah, I think one of the things I hear a lot with my corrections colleagues is that visits are the #1 way that contraband comes into the facility. And so for safety and security reasons, it's really easy to stop those kinds of visits, to stop any kind of in-person visit, frankly. We've seen more and more correctional facilities across the country, turn back any kind of contact visit. So almost all of the jails in our state, for example, are all non-contact, meaning you're visiting through plexiglass or through virtual visitation, like through a phone, or like FaceTime, but 1980s crappy FaceTime. And I think that's why they're moving away. Now, the conjugal visits is an interesting piece, and I guess philosophically for me, I think if a particular person, a currently incarcerated person, doesn't pose a risk to their family and their children such that they can have that kind of contact over a long period of time, the taxpayer in me, the community citizen, the person, my mom in me says, are they a public safety risk and why are they still incarcerated? And I know that that's like really basic thinking, but like if you're gonna put somebody, in some of these states, they have trailers like that are like apartments that currently incarcerated people can go to with their families for the weekend. And I think like, okay, well then why are they still locked up, right? Like why are we not providing structure and support in the community so that they can be with their children? Because to Pamela's point, visits for most currently incarcerated people, face-to-face visits for most people are few and far between. They take tremendous amount of resources, and there's a lot of mixed evidence in terms of the benefits for kids. No, you're allowed to do that. Do you know what it is? No. Okay, I thought somebody can.
No worries, no worries. So I guess a follow-up question to that would be, so what about your child psychologist, your inner child psychologist? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's impossible for me to answer that question without putting on, so like, yes, I'm a child psychologist, but also like, I unexpectedly became a foster parent 4 years ago, and then unexpectedly adopted kids, both whose parents were involved in the criminal justice system. And so like, I can't separate those, and I'm also a guardian ad litem, and so I've seen lots of kids come through child welfare because they've been abused and neglected. And so I feel like I've seen this from lots of different angles, and so I'm conflicted, right? I mean, I think I was just on a call today with a person who had supervised a visit with an incarcerated mother and her 18-month-old. And the professional that was calling me was really upset because the 18-month-old just screamed through the entire visit. And she said, like, Rebecca, I don't know why we're still doing these visits. This is clearly not good for this kid. This kid has so much trauma. This kid is in such a bad place. And I said, well, how much time does mom have left on her sentence? And she said, 4 years. And I said, well, that begs the question, right? Like, mom's not getting out for 4 years. This kid is going to be 5.5 by that point. Are we going to keep up these traumatic visits for how long? And I think often child protection works in the way that we have to demonstrate that visits are bad for kids before we pull them back. And so it's often re-traumatizing to kids to be in that situation, to then demonstrate, oh, this is bad, let's not do this. And the circumstances could be wildly different if you had a mom who was getting out in 3 months, right? And so there's not an easy answer. If that mom was getting out in 3 months and she was going to retain custody of her kid, then I think, what are the interventions that need to be put in place to help that mom repair this relationship with her kid so that she can be the attachment figure for her kid, so that she can help nurture this child during this time of distress, so that this child can see mom as that source of support. We're not talking about 3 months, we're talking about 4 years. And so there are all those factors that I think make this incredibly complicated on the are visits good or bad kind of scenario.
Mm-hmm. So the Shakopee prison, I'm pretty sure it's the Shakopee prison. Is it true that they do kind of a Mother's Day type thing where the children of the women can come in and meet with them?
Yeah, so at Shakopee, there's the standard visiting room where there's regular visits. They're considered contact visits, but it's a hug and a brief kiss on the cheek, and then you sit opposite each other. So like the distance between where Pamela's chair is and yours, rows lined up. But then in addition to those, moms who are involved in the unit, which is a privileged living unit within the facility, participate in parenting education, and they get to have extended visits with their kids. And so those, I think, are probably what you're talking about. They happen on weekends. They get 4 hours with their kids. I have seen birthday parties happen in that room. I have seen holiday celebrations in the children's room. And moms get 4 hours of basically child-friendly, family-friendly activities. They do a craft, they have a meal, they get to spend time together, and they get to process the visit afterwards. And so having been to a lot of extended visits and seeing those happen, they can be really wonderful things. Shakopee used to have overnight visits, so actually the beds in the Shakopee prison in that unit have trundles underneath them from probably now more than a decade ago when kids in that program could stay overnight. And that has gone away with the fear of contraband and others. So that's changed over the years in terms of how much contact moms can have with their kids.
I would like to move to the audience question and answer session. I'd like to be respectful of everyone's time here. Audrey, are you willing to do the mic? So if you have a question, if you can just raise your hand, and then Audrey will bring you the mic. Thank you.
Simple question, or may not be. Can you explain what the DUA is here in Minnesota?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So it's doula, D-O-U-L-A, and that is a non-medical birth support specialist, like a birth coach. And essentially, we didn't get to this, but before we implemented our program in Minnesota, we had our first birth in 2010. Before that, what would happen is women who were pregnant in prison, when they went into labor and delivery, when they went into labor, they would go to the local hospital to deliver. They would, as Pamela described, not have any contact with an outside support person. They couldn't call their husband, they couldn't call their mother, they couldn't call their sister. They would labor and deliver alone, save for 2 armed correctional officers who had to have eyes on them the whole time, often male. A doula in the community, right, is somebody who is often just another a birth support coach who's there to help make sure that pregnant person's plans go as she hopes, to advocate for her, to support her partner, if she has one there, to help educate, nurture, provide a back rub, hold a hand, talk her through the process. So doulas offer physical, emotional, and instrumental support during the whole pregnancy and postpartum period. So our doulas are responsible then for providing support to all of the pregnant women who want to have a doula who come through Shakopee. So not only do the pregnant women at Shakopee now get group-based weekly support from their peers and education, but they're also matched with a doula who provides at least 2 one-on-one visits. They talk about the birth plan, what do they hope for the birth, her previous pregnancies. When the woman goes into labor at the hospital, the watch commander calls the doula and says, you know, Miss Anna just went into labor, and then our doula rushes to the hospital as fast as she can get there. Hopefully it's not 5 o'clock in the metro, and meets her at the hospital and provides continuous labor and delivery support. Then, when the woman is discharged and she's going to go back to the prison and separated from her infant, that's about 48 hours after she delivers. So our doulas come back and provide support during separation, and so that's essentially the time that moms have to say goodbye to their babies. And so our doulas are there again to provide comfort and support, hold a hand, listen, just be there, because that's a really, really difficult time for the moms. So then they go back to prison, baby goes with an elected caregiver in the community, and then our doulas come back to the prison and provide support at least twice during the postpartum period to talk to moms about how they're doing, to provide some informational support about their body after birth. Often there's a lot of questions about lactation. And so our doulas do all the things that doulas do in the community, with some added layers of the complexities of women who are incarcerated.
Hi, my name's Ava. My question is, it might be kind of broad, but also if you can focus in on one part, that'd be good too. I'm kind of wondering what the role of like fathers are for women behind bars in terms of like providing support, if you see that a lot, or if they're allowed to like bring like prenatal vitamins, things like that, or like provide support that way.
Yeah, I can talk about Minnesota and then you're
Okay.
Yeah. So in Minnesota, about a third of the moms who deliver in custody, their babies go with the biological fathers. About another third of the time, they go with a maternal relative, most often maternal grandmother. it really depends, right? I think people have this assumption that there aren't dads or aren't involved, but we've had moms who have been married, who have had lots of, who have had several other children in the support of a committed, loving marriage or relationship, and those dads can't be there, right? And so in many ways, even if there is an engaged and committed father, the correctional system has cut him out of the picture. We also know that there are a lot of dads who need tremendous levels of support. Often, for the moms that we work with, many of the moms that we are working with, they've had a long history of trauma, sometimes with baby's biological father, really traumatic romantic partner history. And many of them are in prison for crimes related to their romantic partners. So a lot of conspiracy things where the dad might be messed up into a lot of criminal activity. Girlfriend should have known, did know, and ends up going to prison for a pretty long period of time for stuff that dad was messed up in. And so that, my child psychologist hat is on then, and then I always think, well, what are the circumstances in which these babies are going home to these biological fathers, right? Who have little support, and I don't know about anybody in this room, but if you walked out of here today and said you're taking a baby home with you, how hard that would be for any of us, right? And so I'm always challenged to think about what are the resources that our dads have when they are taking on this role, when they're bringing a brand new baby home from the hospital, even if they have their lives together, which we know is challenging for a lot of them.
Okay, in Georgia, we don't have a doula program, and even in the federal system, they have a MINT program, but visitation, basically they can visit, but visitation has its limitations as far as how close they can sit to you, their interaction with you. Everything is restricted and monitored. The phone calls are 15 minutes, so I don't know how much information you're going to really get in those 15 minutes, and then after the 15-minute call, you're blocked out for another half hour up to an hour before you can use the phone again. Again, when you're going to deliver your baby, you can't contact anyone, so they don't even know that you're having a baby. They don't find out until after the fact. And again, like Rebecca was saying, you're sending your baby home. In my case, I had 2 sons that my significant other was already at home trying to take care of, and not to sound cliche, but men cannot take care of responsibilities like women. I mean, he was just really having a hard time, and he was like, how do you do this? I'm going to work and I'm taking care of the boy. I was like, it's the stuff that I do every day.
In his defense, he had just lost a partner he cared about, right?
Yes,
So that's
yes.
challenging too.
And so I'm like, it's the stuff that I do every day. He's like, okay, I have a new respect for you because I'm trying to balance it all out and try to make sure I'm there to see you. And, so it's really difficult, for them.
This just reminded me.
And again, the system just basically cuts them out. They don't even acknowledge that, and that's something that maybe should be looked at. If you have a support system, maybe it would make things better for the facility if they would find a way to allow you to have that support, which would alleviate some of the expense or some of the things that they have to provide for the women that are incarcerated. But as of right now, they don't even acknowledge them.
That reminded me of a story that I had heard when we've been working with Alabama to provide training and technical assistance to some community organizations there that are starting and actually have had their first birth at the Tutwiler Women's Prison. But when we went down, maybe now 3 or 4 years ago, for the first time, we were talking with women about their experiences, and one of the most horrifying stories I've heard to date that still sticks with me was 2 moms had been transferred from the prison to deliver their babies the same day, an African-American woman and a white woman. And the dad came to pick up one of the babies, and the nurse said, here's your baby. And he starts to walk away, and he says, ma'am, this isn't my baby. And she says, yes, it is. Take your baby, basically get out of here. And he said he felt so disrespected. He was really upset.
And he looks at this baby and he's like pleading with her, ma'am, this isn't my baby. I know this isn't my baby. And the nurse is like, well, how would you know? You weren't even here. And then he looks at the baby and he's like, because I'm black and my partner is black and this is a white baby. Like, I'm not an idiot, but you've treated me like one. And it was so telling, and this mom was just so upset, to your point, about the sort of lackluster and limited attention paid to just like passing babies out in the hospital. And yeah, just terrifying.
So I know you talked about how like at jails they don't want to give pregnancy tests all for like financial reasons. I do know like some, or at least one of the jails in Minnesota has public health. And how feasible of a change would that be to make, and why does some jails have it and some not? And would it make a big difference?
Yeah, so Alex is cheating. He's come down from my class at the U, which I didn't realize he knew about, but turns out you have a partner here. Here we are. We talked about this a little bit in class. So yes, county jails and state prisons, depending on how they're run, the health services may be run by private companies. Most often that's the case. The state prison here, the state prisons across our state the health services are run by private companies. A lot of our jails in our state are also, the health services are run by private companies. So you'll often hear in the popular press this discussion about public versus private prisons, and while we have public correctional facilities, a lot of it has been privatized. And so I think it's really important for people to think about the fact that the food that comes in has been privatized, the healthcare that's come in has been privatized, they've privatized the phones and the video visitation. So someone is making a lot of money on the backs of people we have incarcerated in the state. And I think that should be in back of mind. Many local jurisdictions have said we're going to retain health services in our county public health. So Washington County, for example, which is where Stillwater is, Ramsey County, Hennepin County is in a little bit of a unique situation where they have said we don't want to privatize health services. We actually want our county public health folks to do it. And that is costly. The jail administrators that I work closely with have said it costs them more to do it that way, but they do it because they philosophically and fundamentally believe that folks in their facilities should get the quality and the same kind of care that they would get in the community. And they're not going to treat them as different or other. They're going to provide them with the best health care and the same public health nurses and physicians that they would have access to in the community. And so that is a choice, but it is not the fiscally conservative one. And they have had to make really compelling arguments to their county boards and their county commissioners about why it's so important to do so. And again, it is not the cheapest option, but I think it does come back to better quality health care.
And 99.9% of the other facilities do not have that attitude. It's about bringing the profit in, not spending any of it out.
Yeah, we heard that loud and clear from the jails as well when we were interviewing them. One of the things that, so in addition to that pregnancy testing, they said they had very few pregnant women, but they might have one or two here this week, or 10 over the last year. They never really kept count. And then we would ask them how many births they had, and we heard more than once, well, we don't have any births. And we would say well, that doesn't quite compute. You have pregnant women, ultimately, those pregnancies resolve in some way, what happened? And we heard on more than one occasion that the jail administrators would call the judge and have the woman released right before she would go into labor, so 8 months, 5 days, because, and I quote, one birth would kill our county budget for the year. And so they were financially motivated to get pregnant women who were going to reach the end of term, out of the jail so that if she delivered in custody, they didn't have to pay for the health care. And that was very clearly stated.
Time for one more question.
I actually have a question about abortions in jails, whether it's accessible at all, whether it's encouraged for financial reasons or not allowed. Can you speak to that?
Again, that's another one of those variable things. It depends on what facility you're in. Some facilities welcome that because if they can get you to opt to an abortion, that's less money that they have to spend on your care and on your delivery. So it's cheaper for them to take care of it with an abortion than the long overhaul of you carrying and having your baby. Other facilities, they don't want to spend money on anything. So if they're not going to give you a pregnancy test, they're definitely not going to pay for an abortion. They don't even mention that there's an option for you to get an abortion. So it just really depends on what facility you're at.
Definitely. I had a healthcare provider once say to me that if he heard a woman ask about an abortion, he was trained and told to essentially ignore her questions. So if a woman came into the facility and said, I'd like to know options about terminating my pregnancy, he literally said he would just ignore the question and pretend he didn't hear her. No state dollars can be used, so public funds, so the Department of Corrections, county jails can't pay for the termination procedure. And in the state of Minnesota, what that means is that women have been told that if they want to terminate their pregnancies, they will have to pay for not only the procedure, but the transportation to and from the clinic, the wear and tear on the vehicle that will get them there, the officer's time to transport them. And so the financial barriers, particularly for a person who's currently incarcerated, maybe making 25 cents an hour if they've been able to get a job, means that is cost prohibitive. And I think it's this really interesting paradox in terms of not providing women with comprehensive health care to support maternal and child health, and yet not providing them with access to terminate their pregnancies. And so it still boggles my mind, like, well, what's the ideal situation here? We're treating people like crap and we're not giving them access to terminate their pregnancies when they want to. And that is an ethically complicated situation, but I think I can say hands down that we're not quite doing it anywhere near right now.
And can they use their personal insurance that they have to help pay for the procedure?
No. So once you're currently incarcerated, if you have private insurance, that's a different situation, but then your ability to actually use that private insurance, and you can't, as a currently incarcerated person, you can't schedule your own health appointments, right? Everything is going through health services, as Pamela described. And so you are at the mercy of whoever is going to schedule those appointments. If you had public health insurance, when a person becomes incarcerated in the United States, if they have public health insurance, they can no longer access those. That service is terminated. Yeah. So Medicaid, even though we cover pregnant women, all pregnant women in the community under Medicaid, everybody would be eligible if you're pregnant in the community. That benefit, that public benefit, is terminated upon incarceration. And so, again, this is a really interesting policy piece in the sense that, like, if we covered pregnant women, would they actually get better care if they were incarcerated, because there would be a mechanism for health insurance and therefore a fee to health care. So that's complicated.
Well, we're nearing the end of our allotted time. I just wanted to sneak in one last question. So over the course of this evening, all of us have learned about just the terrible systematic things that are going on, especially relating to pregnancy and reproductive health. What can we do to help?
Well, what you're doing right now, these kind of conversations, bringing awareness, that's really key, because like I said, there are so many people that don't have a clue, based on the questions that we're getting, don't have a clue what goes on and what's happening, and many of them think, oh, it's 2018, surely we're doing better than that, but we're not. So definitely educating and bringing awareness are the main things you can do, and those things are free and cost you nothing but some time. Other than that, when we put in these policies in place, because we're working daily, putting out policies and bills and everything. If everyone would turn out and vote for them and help get them passed to make changes, because that's the only way we're gonna make the change.
And then I would just say locally, if you are interested in continuing to support this work, to reach out. There are certainly ways to financially support the Prison Doula Project. We run on grants and gifts. So we hold fundraisers regularly. We have one coming up on Monday night, which is hosted by Eat for Equity. But you know, frankly, spreading the word, as Pamela said, and helping people understand what's happening in the state of Minnesota. Our goal would be to make sure that every woman who is in custody never births alone, and that takes financial resources. And so if you're thinking about ways that you can contribute or just contribute time, we're certainly happy to have budding advocates and people who are enthusiastic about this topic join us.
And the link to the Prison Doula site, as well as your petition, the Change.org petition, they're both on the bottom of the handout that you received, so you can access those easily.
Thanks for that.
So
So sign the petition.
Yes,
Yes.
sign the petition. Great. So I think that a really big part is just having individuals like yourselves willing to give the time out of your day. I mean, it's an evening. You've both been through a big day, I imagine. So I'm just overwhelmed with thanks for you both coming and sharing your insights. So let's thank you.